Hello, Market Watcher. I'm David Ravel, and this is Value Side for Thursday, October 7. Today, what happened to Evergrande? That, plus today's economic reports, as well as corporate earnings, coming right up. Well, if you thought it was especially quiet on the Evergrande front this week, you were right. Chinese financial markets were closed for a holiday. But tonight, about the time we're settling in with that nightcap, Chinese markets will reopen on their Friday morning. As it's becoming increasingly obvious that the eyes of the whole world are now focused on Evergrande, the major Chinese real estate company, which skates closer and closer to a financial disaster. And if you think that's a bit of an exaggeration, consider this. A U.S. Secretary of State, our nation's chief diplomat, someone who is in charge of negotiating between nations, a U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is cautioning China to act, quote, responsibly in its workings with Evergrande. Really? We're now including corporate finance as part of the purview of the Secretary of State? Not the Treasury Secretary or Commerce, but Secretary of State? Fascinating. And it's all part of a global move to place some of these major corporations, particularly big tech, in a much higher status, somewhere just short of being an actual country themselves. In a recent Bloomberg editorial, we were introduced to the new term, corporate superpower. And it seems to be no exaggeration to say that there are corporations today which have reached far beyond their own home countries and impact a vast swath of the world. Look no farther than our own Big Five, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, and Google. Their range of services and financial scope go far beyond the USA. And Blinken, at least tacitly, is making that point about Evergrande. Should Evergrande default, something that appears increasingly likely, the impact, it is feared, will be felt worldwide. And Blinken's admonishment that China should act responsibly seems to be a recommendation that China should bail out Evergrande for the good of the world. It's clear that the fear of contagion has now hit foggy bottom. However, most Wall Street analysts now feel that China will not bail out Evergrande. Instead, it looks like the Chinese authorities will try to ring-fence the real estate giant and limit its impact, perhaps protect some of the financial companies and banks who are investors in Evergrande. But as for Evergrande itself, it now looks like they are on their own and will be allowed to fail. After all, just this week Fantasia, a lesser Chinese real estate firm, was indeed allowed to go under the waves. It's a very interesting, distinctly Chinese approach, and a real departure from how the Americans would deal with the problem. Bailouts, after all, have become a normal occurrence on this side of the Pacific. So here's a look at the Evergrande dance card over the next little bit. Everything begins tonight as the Chinese markets reopen after their week-long holiday. Then next week, yet another bond interest payment is due, and this is a brand new bond which we have not yet discussed. And finally, that 30-day grace period for the first set of bonds will expire. And at last, those offshore, dollar-denominated bondholders who've been put on hold for a month, they will at last learn their fate. It's been a long, hard struggle with much more to go. The bond payment schedule for Evergrande continues at least through the end of this year. But in our immediate future, look for Evergrande's overnight trading to have a fairly substantial impact on tomorrow's U.S. markets. Now, the big news overnight internationally has been the drop in the price of oil, after U.S. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm indicated that the administration was prepared to release some of our strategic reserves and even perhaps limit exports. Oil price began to decline, and this morning that decline of oil continues, with both Brent crude and West Texas Intermediate both down about 1%. Good news for European equities, which are now trading up about 1%. A break in energy costs is awfully good to hear when Europe faces a cold winter. In news closer to home, it appears that the Senate has indeed reached an agreement to extend the debt ceiling until December, so we'll push that debate back for another couple of months. On the economic calendar today, we'll shortly see the latest on initial claims and job cuts. Scheduled earnings today include ag giant Conagra, potato processor Lamb Weston, and beauty company Helen of Troy. From the futures desk, it's all positive today for stocks. They're up across the board. Bonds and precious metals are mixed, as are cryptocurrencies. And that's the value side for this Thursday, October 7. I'm David Ravel. Please join me in praying that our country may get back to work.